You're listening to the Conversations with KidsPeace podcast. Advice, information, and inspiration from experts at the leading provider of mental and behavioral health services for children, adults, and those who love them. Now, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to our podcast series, Conversations with KidsPeace. I'm Bob Martin. If you were to say the words sex trafficking to someone a few years ago, they might have assumed you were talking about something happening in another country or in another part of the world. But today there's a growing realization that sex trafficking, and specifically the commercial sexual exploitation of children, is a problem not just elsewhere in the world, but right in our own communities as well. And it's a problem that must be confronted for the sake of its victims. In the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, KidsPeace is partnering with a community coalition to provide help to victims of sex trafficking, cope with the trauma they've experienced, and find ways to build new lives. On this podcast, we have two guests with us. Christy Dominguez, who is a clinician at KidsPeace, who is also president of the Valley Against Sex Trafficking Coalition, and Dominic DeSalvo, Senior Director of Clinical Services in KidsPeace Residential Treatment. Welcome to you both.
Good to be here.
Christy, we're going to start with you. Valley Against Sex Trafficking, or VAST. This is a community coalition here in the Lehigh Valley on this issue. What are the organizations and groups that are part of the coalition, and what are some ways that they're working in concert with each other on this issue?
Yeah, at this point, I feel like who is not part of the coalition is the better question. We in the coalition, in the professional community, Turning Point, Crime Victims Council, KidsPeace, Lehigh County Drug and Alcohol have really been coming around us and leading the way in setting goals and benchmarks for us to begin addressing this issue of human trafficking from a really unified community response, having a protocol that we would all follow, and all being on the same page about the importance of trauma-informed care and really identifying gaps and not necessarily filling the gaps, but bridging over them and recognizing that they're there. On the other hand, we're also, I like that you called us the community coalition, because we're not just a task force, we also engage the broader community of people who have multiple and diverse talents and skills and passions, and we also engage those individuals as well in doing canvassing and raising awareness and bringing this information to their faith groups or to their mom groups or whoever really will listen. Like I said, at this point, it's who's not part of the coalition.
Now, how did this coalition come about originally?
So this really started as a very grassroots movement. Two licensed clinical social workers from the Valley were learning about sex trafficking, and we're learning that this is not taken. This is not a Hollywood film. This is actually really something that's happening, and it's alive in most of our communities, and really beginning to identify what that looks like in the lives of the people in our communities. And as they begin to identify that here in the Valley, they began raising awareness, holding community forum meetings for people to talk about this and learn about it, training law enforcement, connecting with Homeland Security in our area. And slowly this movement of just raising awareness and advocating that we pay attention to this issue in our community, it really turned into It turned into identifying victims, and now that we're identifying them, what are we doing to engage them, and how can we really offer service that's going to be relevant and helpful for them? And it just snowballed into eventually we became a 501c3, and now we're an advocacy organization that facilitates the community coalition.
Now, you mentioned awareness, and that's such a huge thing we talked about in the open of our podcast here. Can you describe a situation that you've become aware of in the community that would be basically tied to sex trafficking or the commercial sexual exploitation of children?
You mean like a case?
Yes.
Yeah. So, just very recently, I can go back, and I don't want to give too much of a story, but very recently through our more pulling coalition partners closer together, Lehigh County Drug and Alcohol, we're trying to assist Valley Youth House with a case in getting some type of drug and alcohol outpatient services. And so they called on VAST because, it's really not the function of any one agency to coordinate and figure out all these moving pieces. So VAST, we've been kind of trying to connect her with community-based resources, getting her connected with a peer mentor, getting her connected to other services in the coalition. And all of this was before she could get her hands on Medicaid to have, the local agencies pay for this. So now she's there at that point. But this has been an ongoing case of collaboration between three large entities, and had these individual champions in the agencies, in Valley Youth House, in the Lehigh County Drug and Alcohol, and VAST, had we not had this understanding of the type of communication that it is required and the type of collaboration it takes, this individual may have not had she may have been identified as having some type of sex trafficking activity or background, but she may not have had as much of a web of care surrounding her. And so it's not just about raising awareness like, hey, this is happening out here, but hey, this is happening out here, and this is how we need to change our systems to actually show as a community and as a wide network of professionals that we care about this. And
I would assume that in those situations, we're seeing, absent some of that cooperation, absent some of that thinking about the web of services,
right.
The risk of that individual falling back into that world is greater.
Absolutely. There are risks and vulnerabilities of falling through the cracks of service, and then even falling deeper back into the life that I think this individual, the activity started when she was very young, like 13 or 14. And so to be 18 and almost aging out of some type of care is very dangerous, because she's highly at risk and vulnerable to not just falling through the cracks, but then relying on that way of life until she's in her mid-20s, mid-30s. And, some of the victims and survivors we work with now, they are in their 50s, and they're reflecting back on 30 years of participating in trafficking or being trafficked themselves.
Are there similar coalitions to VAST in other communities that you're aware of?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And this is actually a very exciting thing, is that regionally there's a Montgomery County Coalition, there's BCAT in Bucks County Coalition Against Trafficking. There's a pretty large group out of Philadelphia that's working in a coalition manner. And all of these local coalitions, we've been getting together about 3 times a year, and we're trying to figure out how can we have a greater impact as like a regional network of coalitions, and what can we do with that to make larger systems change in Pennsylvania.
And Dominic, you've been involved, I think, in some of those discussions as well, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the really nice things and great things that VAST and the coalition have really started to do is, when you look at the idea of trafficking and the identification of trafficking victims, it really has been broken down into 3 parts, which is the prevention, when someone is at risk, how to prevent them from falling into that world; the identification, once someone is presenting as a risk, being able to find someone to be able to adequately assess them; and then the long-term treatment needs for that individual once they have been identified and looking to get out of that world. And the problem in the state has been, even to this day, has been joining those 3 facets. It's trying to find someone to be able to, or find a group, and that's where VAST has come into play a lot, to connect those dots, because we still don't do a very good job of that.
I would imagine that prior to this sort of awakening of the coalitions, it was really stuck in law enforcement. Law enforcement was come in, they would find that behavior, and then you would kind of not have the right tools in the toolkit to deal with, as you said, identifying someone who's at risk, or helping treat and give some hope to people who have been involved with it. So, like you said, it's almost not even just filling the gaps; it's really putting the entire picture on the page.
Yeah, their needs are so great, and that was the key relationship that propelled the coalition, I would say, in our area, is the law enforcement and the founders of our movement locally, their relationship of law enforcement saying, like, we're going to get out there, we're going to identify this, we're passionate about this, but we're not social service providers, and these women have such immense need. And then the social workers kind of saying, yeah, so we can't do this by ourselves either. We need a community of people wrapping around these individuals to And that's what we see here at KidsPeace too, is really a team of people wrapping around one individual and saying, we've got you.
Now, if someone were listening to this and they said, hey, I'd really like to see if I could start something like that, like VAST in their region, what would be the main advice you would give them?
The main advice I would give them is to, and this is super abstract, but follow the synergy of where are people already talking about this. Get ready to have a lot of coffee dates, because it takes a lot of pots of coffee with all the different people talking about this in your area to begin aligning. Where do we have the capacity and resources to start? Maybe you don't have the capacity to start with awareness. Maybe you have that one individual law enforcement who's really excited about identifying some of these cases. Maybe you don't have that. Maybe you have a bunch of groups of people who just want to host movie nights and just raise awareness. Hey, this is happening. Hey, this is happening. Just follow where the capacity for it is to start, and it will just begin to unfold as more people, like they say, build it, and people will come. Get moving, and you've got the right momentum.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of momentum, I think it's really important. You mentioned a number of groups who are part of the coalition. VAST has received some substantial support from certain community groups in the area here, the United Way, the local community foundation. Can you explain what they're funding and what the coalition is going to be able to do with that support?
Yeah, so Lehigh Valley Community Foundation and Women United have been two of our grantors, two of our main supporters, not just in granting funds, but in raising awareness alongside of us and using their scope of influence to maximize our megaphone in a way. So we're really excited with this funding to be able to hire more staff to support more activity in the coalition. And we're also excited about being able to do more for survivors in regards to their desire to be advocates and leaders. So right now we're providing seminars, and we host a group of survivors who lead and facilitate their own support group. And so we're really excited about getting them some training and support to be able to lead this movement with us, because we really feel like this coalition, it can do great work, but it can do excellent work if it's led by those who have been closest to the pain. And so be able to bring experts in and to be able to bring materials and curriculums and provide at our annual retreat that we do for survivors, really provide a lot of community capacity building to strengthen their community so that their community is leading the way in the coalition work.
And I can tell you, having been to a couple of those presentations, they are absolutely riveting. When you talk to people who have lived this and hear their lives and realize. And I said in the opening to the podcast, back in the day, you might have thought sex trafficking is something that happens somewhere else to someone else. When you hear about it and you realize these folks are part of our community and they're not that much different than you and I.
Right.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and kind of going along that line of the megaphone, and I think what I have heard in many of the different meetings, even around the counties that I've been at in the last couple of months, was that one event that Christy and I both sort of jaws dropped during when we were at the United Way, when the demand abolition from Boston came and did an amazing presentation about their work at really looking at ways to look at stopping the demand for sex trafficking. And, in that meeting, they set up an operation that was through Backpage.com, which if you don't know what Backpage.com is, it's something that, everyone is starting to get to know all about.
Don't type it in.
Yeah, don't type it in.
NSFW, I believe is the phrase people use.
So on Backpage.com that day, they set up a fictitious account with our law enforcement that were there that day. And the number of people right here in the Lehigh Valley that called that day was staggering. Christy, you remember that phone did not stop ringing.
She was getting pinged all morning.
Yeah, and it was amazing just to see the technology around. The one individual whose Facebook page was brought up with his kids in the background right here in the Lehigh Valley was such a a sort of like
shocking,
hard-hitting thing that really has resonated, because people still talk about, that presentation in that group and how it's filtered down the line for people who haven't even been there.
Right. Not only are there victims here in the Valley, there are people victimizing here in the valleys.
Right.
Good point.
Right. Wow. And it is eye-opening, which is hardly strong enough to describe how surprising it is. Yeah. If someone's interested in information about VAST, what's the best way to find that out?
TheVAST.org on our website. We have links to other websites there. I think we'll also go to demandabolition.org. They have a lot of great stats and research. They have a lot of national network resources. And also, if you just wanted more direct information, tangible, you could email info@thevast.org or go to our Facebook. The handle is VAST Coalition.
Okay. Dominic, I want to turn to you now because KidsPeace's involvement with the coalition is very integral, I think, to certainly the VAST folks will tell you that. I want to talk about the enhanced trauma program that you've put together that is designed to help the victims of commercial sexual exploitation of children. The acronym is CSEC. It goes further than traditional treatment to include more life skills development. Why do you feel that that's important for this particular population?
Well, I think what we were seeing even before we even had the idea regarding the CSEC program is just mental health treatment when you come to victims of trauma. It's great. We want to make sure they have the ability to be able to work through and regain power in their life and be able to tell their story. But what we were finding was a lot of those individuals, especially victims of trafficking, were being led to believe that all they are good for is that abuse, that sex, those types of things. So their self-empowerment, their self-esteem, their ability to see a future for themselves was becoming even more and more limited. And in this day and age when you have social media even becoming more of the cyberbullying and things of that nature, we wanted to give people the ability to truly have skills when they go back home or they go back to their community to live beyond just being a survivor of trafficking, but really becoming a thriver. It's one of the words that I know it's not a real word that we talk about, but truly, my goal when I work with victims of sex trafficking or victims of trauma is to get them from feeling like a victim to a survivor to being a thriver, feeling that they can thrive in the communities that they go back to. And the life skills opportunity, the community living program that we're developing really was one of the first steps that we had. To give them skills such as, how to cook for themselves, what a checkbook is, their idea that they get to control and have their own money for themselves. I mean, many victims of trafficking, even though they may, you may see in the media or you may see in Pretty Woman, they get paid hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. They may see $5 of that per night. And it's another mechanism of control the traffickers have. So many of them have never even known what it means to have a job or budget or finance, and try to give them that empowerment and give them that individuality. And part of the life skills programming too is to develop that individuality for them. What is something that they are passionate about? We've had some of our girls who found out that they love clothes. So we're hoping to eventually see them maybe become the next Giovanni Versace or something. That they get to be able to go to the New York Fashion Institute or something. We want to find that passion in them and then give them that ability to not have the people who controlled them for so long and held them back, not have that control anymore and give them those possibilities.
You told me a story, and actually we put it in our Healing magazine last year when we did the special edition on this. That was just so striking and really heartbreaking, along the lines of what these girls are coming into our program, how they're feeling about themselves. Can you just tell the story of the girl and the T-shirt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it was a long time ago when I worked. It was a very difficult case. A young lady had been severely traumatized. We originally had just thought it was just, a case of sexual abuse. And it turned out that she had really been a victim of trafficking. She was being used in many ways, shapes, and forms her body was basically becoming, a monetary thing for other people. So when, we were working with her, one of the things that she really kind of hit home for her was one day she ran out of clean clothes.
This is while she's in our program.
While she's in the residential program, she was out of clean clothes, and she really wanted to go on an activity. So, she asked to borrow a clean shirt from one of the other kids. And at that moment, the other kid said, "Okay, if you do a sex act on me, I will let you borrow clean clothes." And she, in her mind, had no problem with just doing it. It was just normalized for her. And that, and when we talked about it afterwards, and when she was finally able to open up and process about it, that was really her turning point, where she finally realized, I literally am worth more than a T-shirt. And that ended up being one of the things that we talked about. Whenever she started feeling down, whenever she started to have struggles, we talked about, remember, you're more than a T-shirt. And that really was a sort of a grounding technique that really helped her sort of put in perspective everything that she had gone through, and now everything that she is willing to go through to get herself help. So when you talk about it from like that motivational interviewing standpoint, forever she was in that pre-contemplative stage of change. She didn't think she had a problem. It wasn't her, her deal. She had total control over her life. Nothing was bothering her. And then that moment really led her to be into that contemplative stage of change, to realize she had to make a change because her body, to her, and rightfully so, was worth more than a T-shirt.
That change is really one of the things you're trying to accomplish through the efforts, and you're combining these trainings in skills, as you noted, that they're going to need to have a better life. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what kinds of skills you're training them for and how you're going about that?
So a lot of the skills that we are trying to train them for are really what everyday individuals take for granted. So what I mean by that is, for instance, I think anyone who has grown up knows how to do laundry, or anyone knows how to cook themselves an egg, or knows how to, have that individual ability to make that choice. And many of these kids who come into our program who have been trafficked were never allowed those opportunities. So just the idea of giving them the ability to cook. We did a great job, with them about a year or two ago, where they learned how to bake cookies. I mean, how many people talk about baking cookies with their mom or baking cookies with their grandmom? And these girls, for the first time, learned how to bake cookies, but then had the ability to then know that those cookies were being delivered to a homeless shelter. So it's that extra step forward of that learning what they could do to help others. And those skills are really important in that empowerment, helping them feel like they have that voice, that ability to do more.
I think also I love that example you gave, because it also starts to bring to light for them the impact that they can have on their community, because their community has only impacted them in a negative way. And so this idea of community is a really dangerous dog-eat-dog world. And really what you're teaching them with baking cookies is you're teaching them their interpersonal strength. You're teaching them that their power and their what their actions do ripple down to. And that's community, is when what you do impacts for good, like out there. And I think that's even more of a powerful skill or knowledge base to have about yourself when you leave a very protected environment like the KidsPeace program.
And certainly, anything that allows you to believe, look, you do have control of yourself, but also you can have that positive impact on others, has got to be empowering and reinforcing of the messaging and the lessons that we're trying to impart to them here. Dominic, what's next for your program? Where do we go from here?
So right now, we are in the process of expansion. So originally, we brought the Life Skills and Community Living program really on board to help our female victims of trafficking and trauma in our Pioneer Center. And what has been amazing, KidsPeace has gotten behind that program so much that we are now expanding it into our male programs as well. So by the end of 2018, we are now transitioning to have male trauma and trafficking programs that can help males, not just as well as females, really get the opportunity to be heard, to be able to get their story told, to become that thriver. So, Christy and I have been working hand in hand recently to try to develop a mobile store. So we have recently
And I would explain what the store is now so that you can understand. It's again, another almost a laboratory for teaching people life skills.
So currently our point store, our store that we have right now is sort of housed in a couple of wardrobes in our clinician's office down in our Pioneer Center. And really what it is the girls get to do preference inventories with each other to identify what it is that motivates them. What do they want to work for? What can they help each other in kind of getting for themselves? So there's things like body wash. I mean, everyone wants a certain body wash, wants to smell a positive way, which is great. There's snacks. There are MP3 players, coloring books, regular books. So a whole bunch of different opportunities and ideas, small from an immediate gratification standpoint to delayed gratification with larger opportunities. Bed sheets. We've talked many times about different ways that they could have like individual one-on-one attention with staff. Some of them really wanted to have lunch with their clinician or things that they didn't have the opportunity to in a general program. So we really wanted to give them those opportunities as well. And the plan is over the next couple of months to work with a team outside of KidsPeace to develop a larger scale store so that we'll be able to get larger objects, things that kids would really want to work for. One of the great stories that me and Christy laugh about a lot, we had a young lady, very smart, very gifted, had a lot to offer, and she had this bright idea that her family used to put things in layaway. So what she wanted to do was she offered, can we do layaway in our point store? So the idea of a larger object for individuals like the girls that come into our program who haven't had the opportunity to learn what delayed gratification really means. Right. Put something in an area that they get to see every time they walk in and earn points to work towards. So they don't have to worry that object that they wanted or they felt like they wanted to earn would go away or be lost. They get to know that it's there and be able to have the motivation to work towards doing that. So the goal is to get that up and running in all of our boys programs as well, and that's the goal for 2018.
Christy, what's next for VAST?
What's next for VAST? My goodness, we want to do a wider scale awareness. We know we're reaching people, but we've also ran into people and we have no idea what VAST is. We have no idea trafficking. What's that? And so we're like, oh, okay. So awareness raising is never a job that's over. And so going a little bit wider scale with that and with our partners now with Women United, really being able to reach that scope that we have identified as needed, and really just continue to launch the coalition forward in a way that is led by the voices that are closest to the pain, and continuing to work collaboratively and strengthen our champions like KidsPeace within the coalition so that they continue to be a loud voice as well.
Outstanding. And we do want to give a lot of shout outs to those organizations that are part of VAST, and there's plenty of room for more. So if you think your organization or you want to become involved, as I said, vast.org is the website, and you can take a look there. Our final question, we always ask our guests for a life hack. It's proving to be more traumatic than I anticipated for a lot of folks. But what we're looking for is that piece of advice, maybe a tip on doing something, an everyday activity better, maybe just something that helps the day go along a little bit better. So, Christy, we started with you, so I'm going to start with Dominic on this. Dominic, what's your best life hack?
So I'm one of those people who probably were a little petrified when this comment first came around. Those who know me know I don't have a problem talking. But truthfully, I think one of the things that really has come to my attention when thinking about what is something that I want to leave behind for the people that I work with or the individuals I encounter, and that's just the idea of reminding us to say thank you to the kids we work with. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times in this profession, the little things escape us. We're so worried about identifying what the next safety plan is, what the next, life skill is that we have to teach these individuals. But what we forget to do is remember that when these kids first come in, we may be the only individuals that have ever not expected something from them in return for them doing something and talking with us or being with us or giving us a glimpse into the pain that they have felt all of their life. So what I tell my clinicians all the time is remember to say thank you for that individual. When they truly are ready to open up to you, that is one of the most proudest moments I've ever had as a clinician. I remember a time when I worked with an individual who, every time I would meet with them, had to make sure she had on a wig, had makeup, had clothing that was like really nice, and she really like had this persona. And I never felt more proud of myself as a clinician until that day when she came to our session without her wig on, without her makeup on, and really I got to see the real her. And I thanked her that day. And she laughed at me. She's like, "Why are you thanking me, Mr. Dominic?" I'm like, because truthfully, you letting me in means that you feel safe enough and you trust me enough that you're okay with being who you truly are. And we have to remember that as clinicians and social workers, that these kids, if they if they feel safe enough to open up to us, that's what we have to hold on to, especially in this world of burnout and this, difficulty with remembering those small things. I think that is something we always have to keep proud of ourselves as clinicians, is we get something that many professions don't get that opportunity to do, is we get to truly change the lives of the individuals we meet, and we should be proud of that.
That's fantastic. Christy,
Yeah.
your best life hack for us.
Life hack. I don't know if I like that term. I think Dominic was moving into my kind of life hack metaphor, is that we really have to follow the ebb and flow. The world is always demanding from us a motorboat point A to point B style kind of bottom line, business matters. And when you're doing work with people, you have to tack with the wind and just set your sails to go with the flow and the synergy happening around you, and be grateful for that instead of feel pressured and crammed by that. And I think that applies to anyone doing work anywhere, is to go with the ebb and the flow and not be like, cranky about it, but really embrace it and follow where the wind takes you.
I think that's a really good thing to remember, that in whatever business you're in, you're going to have those very well defined markers or milestones or goals or whatever, but there isn't really a form of endeavor that you're not dealing with people.
Yes.
And people are those crazy winds that come out from there, and you do have to learn how to set your sails and tack to them.
Right. Yeah, you can't do violence against those people just because they're not what you want them to be at the moment.
Right. And you would hope that then, and Dominic, this goes to what you were just saying, you'd hope then that they would also appreciate that effort from you,
right,
for giving them the opportunity to succeed as well. And I think, well, you guys have been great, and the work you're doing is so important, and we really advise everybody to look into this. This is a problem in our community, but the only way it's going to be addressed is by the community itself, as you've heard today. Christy Dominguez and Dominic DeSalvo from KidsPeace, and of course the work of the vast coalition, Valley Against Sex Trafficking. Again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
And thank you for joining us as well. We look forward to you joining us again for more Conversations with KidsPeace. Take care. If you have comments, questions, or suggestions about our Conversations podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Go to www.kidspeace.org to learn more about the series and share your thoughts.